going off into, there we go. Okay, so let's see, I think there's a couple of people here that we have not had that are new to our meetup group or to these Zoom meetups. Let's see, Wave there, this is your first time?
Yeah, I was just browsing for astrology groups. I'm in New Mexico, and the Santa Monica one showed up. I've been to meetups for astrology all over the country, and I just thought I would
see what we're like.
Yeah,
Great.
see what we're like. And
that is,
yeah.
If there's any benefit to this pandemic and the shutdown, it's the fact that so many ended up going, like meetup groups ended up going on to Zoom or something, and as a result, it's a lot easier to connect with other people, like-minded people around the country. And it's easy. You can pop in and see what that group is up to and what are they talking about. Yeah, I belong to several other groups. I don't participate as much as I would like to. I just always seem to be busy doing something else. But well, great. Glad you're here. So you've been involved in astrology for a while, or
about 40 years.
That's a while.
Just a little bit.
Yeah.
It came on really early, at a young age, a teenager. Many astrologers get the calling when they're young like that,
Yeah.
And when you get the calling to come to astrology, it's not really like something that you hesitate about too much, because it goes straight into your heart. Mm-hmm. Like, come. And then, once you get that calling, it's like becomes a passion and somewhat of an obsession. And I studied for, probably for 30 straight years with different teachers with the NCGR. And then I got involved with shamanic astrology as well, which takes into account more of the geophysical cosmic universe. So you could see things more on a scale of how the solar system is actually working, and going out and looking at the planets, which was greatly added to my understanding of what it's like.
Yeah, I think it's always nice to have an understanding and appreciation for the night sky, the planets, where they are. I mean, like, right now, I think you can still catch Venus and Saturn and Jupiter fairly close together in the evening sky. It's always a nice sight. So do you have like a web page or a newsletter or anything like that you do?
I do have a website. It's called allplanetsdirect.com.
Okay.
In 2008, there was a discovery, sort of a new perception came to me in 2008. And it had to do with all planets being in direct motion. And I called it that, all planets in direct motion. I'm not very creative or inventive, but that's what it was. And it was all planets in direct versus all planets in direct motion. And it took me like months to be able to figure out which one did I want to go with. And I ended up keeping the motion, because it's because of one planet stationing direct, and that's a motion that creates that event, and one planet that stations retrograde that uncreates the event or stops the event, if you see what I mean. So motion is a very important part of the all planets in direct motion. And you might have heard about it. It went viral. I wrote these articles first for the NCGR, and then I wrote articles for popular websites, and it went all around the world. So everybody now knows about all planets in direct motion. But they don't know that I was the one that first brought it to their attention, that it is actually an event with a beginning and an end for most of them. Mm-hmm. It's a non-cyclical cycle, because it doesn't reoccur all the time at the same time.
No, it's about, I think it's like maybe 1/8 of the time all planets are in direct motion. And I hadn't really thought about the idea that where you have one planet, you have two planets changing direction in proximity to each other in terms of time or something. That's an interesting. I'll have to read your work. Thank you.
The original article is up there. It was the second one. The first one was peer reviewed by astrologers all around the world.
Hmm.
And they gave me some great scope to pan it out to get it more concrete. And then it's the second one that was published.
Is that
So
the second one went in the NCGR journal?
it was the second, yeah, that went into the NCGR. I actually had an article that went into the NCGR.
Congratulations. I'll have to check my back issues and find it.
It's my claim to fame.
All right. Welcome. Glad you joined us.
Yeah.
Thanks very much.
Do we
And
have any other first timers here? Elizabeth, you're a first timer, right?
Yes, I'm a first timer.
We're glad you're here.
I'm right out of the shower today, but I'll put my video on for a minute.
There you are.
Morning, everyone.
Certainly hope this isn't your last. We'll try to make it enjoyable enough so that it's not your last.
Oh, don't worry about that.
Mhm.
Yeah, I got also at a young age, I started studying astrology just on my own. So I certainly don't have the breadth and scope like some of you folks do. And then for several years, I just got really busy with work and career. And even now, I still have almost a vague idea what's happening. I know we had the eclipse and a lot of Sagittarius aspects recently. But I just like to stay more involved. And since you guys do all the homework, I can just come in and you can tell me what's going on. I do look at it sometimes, but yeah, just to stay more current. I feel like I have a good foundation as far as understanding the energy of the planets and things like that. But I'd say definitely I'm not super aware of what's happening right now. And I have a hard time keeping up with it because I have so many things going on. I have Mars and Gemini, so I'm always all over the place.
Yeah.
But anyway, that's it for my intro. I'm
Well, thank
happy
you.
to see all these astrologically minded folks in one place. So
Yeah, it's nice. Okay. So I'm going to go ahead and get the show started.
Oh, I did want to say,
Yes.
hi, everyone. It's my second time here.
Hi, Ray.
Hi, how are you? It's my second time
Good.
here. I haven't been here in a while, but I wanted to say, I always see your guys' notifications pop up and I try to come in when I can.
Yeah.
I'm a Scorpio sun, Libra moon, Cancer rising, a lot of stuff going on. So I enjoy the energy and I enjoy learning. So thank
Great.
you so much.
Good. Yes. If there's anybody else that wants to add anything before we get into the show, please feel free to do so. You know, when we used to meet in person, it was great because we'd always start with what we call the talk around. And we'd go around and we'd introduce ourselves and we'd all offer up our three biggies, you know, the sun, moon, and ascendant or rising signs. And it was always interesting to watch how it played out in the groups because you'd always find that even though people came in at different times and sat down at random places, in some cases, you know, it's like, well, they know each other. They'd sit. There'd always be clusters, you know, like there'd be a Cancer cluster over here or a Taurus cluster there, or, you know, it's always interesting how people just kind of gravitated down.
You know, Jay, oh, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Go ahead.
No, I teach beginning classes as well, and that's 6 weeks a class, 2 different levels, so 12 weeks altogether. And I have noticed throughout the years that there is always a pattern in the students that show up. Astrologically, there's a pattern, and I never know what it's going to be. And I keep thinking I should do a study on it because it's so weird. But like I'll have everybody in the class has stelliums in 2 cardinal signs and nothing else. Or, you know, they were all Scorpio suns one time. It was very weird and things like that. So there is some kind of weird pattern that shows up, in, like you're saying.
Yeah, I know in one of my early classes, there were several of us we had several Virgos and we also had a cluster of Sagittarius rising. So, and you know, it's just interesting how that happened.
I just wanted to say a quick shout out. My name is Melissa Markham. I'm actually in St. Augustine, Florida. So I'm all the way on the other side of the country. I'm a practicing. Yeah, I'm an astrologer and I specialize in the lunar nodes, life purposeful mission. So just wanted to give a shout out.
Yes, thank you. Yes, so, you know, one of the things I hope that happens from this is that, as you know, because we can now be scattered all over the country is that you start to connect. We can find people to connect with around the country that have similar interests. I know I've been doing some playing around with the lunar nodes a lot. I've been looking at transiting nodes and just how they affect the chart. And I don't talk, and from that perspective, I mean, if you take your nodes and you just transit the nodes around your natal chart and see how, because in most cases, what's going to happen is you're going to have maybe a north node conjunction, and then maybe a couple of south node conjunctions, and then some north node conjunctions. It's going to go back and forth typically, but in some cases, it doesn't go that way. Sometimes you have a long span where you may have the north node hitting several planets before the south node hits anybody. Those kind of things, and I find that I find it interesting. I haven't done enough of a study yet to see if there's really any substantive thing there. But okay,
I'd want to tell you something, James, since you're looking at that. The transiting nodes just entered the first house of the U.S. chart. So yeah, I had the same thing. So
yeah.
yes, it is interesting.
Okay, I just wanted to introduce myself. I'm coming now since a few times, but I don't think I ever had a chance to introduce myself.
Please.
My name is Pascio. I'm a Libra sun, moon in Scorpio, and Leo rising. And I'm dabbling in astrology since 30 years. I'm self-taught, but I also have been facilitating some groups, teaching how to understand the planets. And right now, I'm very much affected by the Uranus-Saturn square, because Uranus is conjuncting my MC, and Saturn is in my 6th house. So if there's any chance to hear more about that today, if it fits in the program, I would love to hear more.
Yes, actually, that's one of the charts we'll be looking at. Is
Good.
the third and final Saturn-Uranus square that's coming up.
Great. Thank you.
Does anybody else want to introduce themselves? Have anything to offer? Remember to keep checking here and make sure I don't leave somebody sitting in the waiting room too long.
Oh, sorry. I did want to ask, I don't know if you guys ever have a focus group on progressions or anything like that. But I'm also interested in that. I don't know if you guys have a specific
We
date.
haven't done that yet, but it's something we need to do.
Okay.
Because it's one of those predictive techniques, and that's an idea too that has crossed my mind. Because we're still trying to kind of figure out what do we want to cover in 22.
Okay.
And so yeah, progressions is a good one.
Woohoo! Thank you.
Yeah. Anything else? Anybody else? Okay, you can always jump in as we move through. Normally, we may have some kind of a fairly lengthy kind of lecture type presentation, and we don't always, so interruptions are not always welcome. But they're always welcome, but you may not want. But this time we're going to basically be talking about charts, so it's pretty much going to be an open conversation as we go along. So I don't see anybody else waiting in the waiting room, so I'm going to switch us over. Okay, recording is going on. Okay, I'm going to share my screen. That's where we're at. Share. Start just. Come on. Come on. Come on. There we go. All right, it is over a little bit. Okay, so, well, I titled it Goodbye 2021, Hello 22. Spencer is going to be popping in and out. He has other commit came up today. Basic agenda, we got our little welcome. I'm going to talk about the upcoming astronomical / astrological events that are, excuse me, coming up between this and our next meetup, which is in January 9th, I believe it is. And then we're going to, basically say goodbye to 21. We'll talk about, we're going to review the 2 eclipses that we just had, and then we're going to look at the stuff that's still coming up in 21, the Venus retrograde, the Capricorn ingress, and the Saturn Uranus square. And then we'll move on to 22. The 4 eclipses, the major calendar events. The biggies, of course, are going to be the USA's 3 Pluto returns. And then we have a national election day in November. And then at some point we'll say goodbye. So without further ado, okay, so welcome. I want a big thank you to all of you. We've actually passed the 1,000 member mark. And last I checked right before this, we were at 1,013. So again, it's a welcome to all the new members, to the first timers. Everybody is always invited and welcome to come and go as you please. And so we've had a suggestion already for progressions. If there's anything else that you would like us to cover this year and the coming year, let me know. My idea is the thing about doing the 12 houses, and from the approach of trying to kind of combine the Western and Vedic perspective on houses. Another possibility would be the Sun, Mercury, Venus cycles. They're unique because Mercury and Venus orbit inside the Earth's orbit. Maybe basics of aspects. We recently talked about aspect patterns and chart patterns, but we haven't talked about the basic aspects, applying and separating aspects and the like recently. Maybe we can talk about Lilith, or the Black Moon, as some call her, or one of her other various manifestations. Maybe, yes.
Jim, if you're doing progressions, would you include the draconian chart or the profections? I mean,
Profections.
Mhm.
Yeah, I'll think about those and see if how well they fit in with the progressions. Yeah, because I'd also want to. The other thing would be solar arc, because they all kind of play together, and sometimes it's easy to get them confused, particularly when you're new and you're not familiar with them. So yeah, we'll probably do I was thinking about a session on predictive techniques, and that would encompass all of them. And maybe a session where we talk about Sedna and Eris and some of the other new minor planets. And then anything else that you offer up. So we've got progressions and profections now. All right. Working well. Thank you. So here's the biggies coming up between now and our January 9th meetup. We have on the 18th, which is Saturday, full moon, 27 Gemini. It's called the cold moon. That's the most common name. It has some other names. Sunday the 19th, early morning, Venus stations retrograde at 26 Capricorn. On the 21st, winter solstice, the sun enters Capricorn.
Well, I was waiting for you, boo-boo.
Yeah.
You're welcome, asshole.
Okay. Oh,
Welcome.
somebody needs to mute. Then on the 22nd, the mean lunar nodes should be moving into Taurus and Scorpio. On the 23rd, we have our third and final Saturn, third quarter square Uranus. On Christmas morning, retrograde Venus conjuncts Pluto, which is the second of their 3 conjunctions. On the 28th, Mercury returns in bounds, and then Jupiter later in the day will returns to Pisces. On the 29th, we have Mercury conjunct retrograde Venus. They really only make 2 aspects, 2 of the major aspects. Those are sextiles and conjunction. So it's kind of an interesting cycle. With the new year, we have a new moon on January 2nd at 12 Capricorn January 3rd, Earth reaches its perihelion when it's closest to the sun. And then a few minutes later, Mercury will enter Aquarius. You know, it's a little trippy to think that in the wintertime, for us, the Earth is actually closest to the sun. But it's because of the tilt of the Earth on its axis that it's cold rather than hot. Summertime is when the Earth is farthest from the sun, which is also the hottest time for us.
Tim, this is
yes.
Brenda. Are we also closer to the moon? The moon seems really clear. Is it just clear skies? It seems.
The moon has every month it's got its closest approach and its farthest approach. So I'm not sure right where it's at right now.
Okay.
Yeah.
It's just sitting up there looking great lately.
Yeah. Let's see, perihelion. Then on the January 8th, retrograde Venus has its inferior conjunction with the sun at 18 Capricorn. That's basically when Venus aligns with the Earth and the sun. Venus passes directly between the two. Now, unless Venus and the sun are also aligned in declination, that is up and down, you won't see it cross the sun's surface. That happens on a regular cycle every 112 years, I think it is, and then 8 years later it does it again, or something like that. Then January 9th, it's our next meetup. Okay. How are we doing? We're doing good. Okay, here we go. So we're going to look at some charts. This is the chart for the November 19th lunar eclipse. Anybody got any questions or have any good eclipse stories from that one? Thing to keep in mind with eclipses is that they occur under two conditions. Basically, you need a new moon or a full moon, and they have to be close to the lunar nodes. And you can see here the sun is and the moon are about 4 degrees from the nodes. So that's why it was a eclipse and a total on that, I think. All right, moving along. Here's the solar eclipse from December 3rd that we just had at 12 Sagittarius 22. Any Sagittarians out there? And you can see again, now here they're 11 degrees off from the nodes. And so it was a total solar eclipse, but we didn't get to see it because it was on the other side and it was a relatively short one. And with solar eclipses, you'll get a solar eclipse when it's a little bit farther from the nodes. A lunar eclipse, which is the full moon, has to be a bit closer about to the nodes in order to have even a partial eclipse. Okay. All right, here we go. Here's the here's the Venus retrograde chart. This is December 19th, 2:36 a.m. LA time. See Venus at 26, Capricorn 29. So if you have, planets or sensitive points that are around 26 degrees of any of the cardinal signs, you may feel it when Venus makes that shift. It's also fairly close, as you can see, less than a degree from Pluto. Also, if you've got something in around 26 of one of the Earth signs, it should feel a little easier though, because they're trining. Venus has an interesting cycle. She goes retrograde about every 18 months and will be retrograde for about 40 to 42 days and it is during that phase that she passes into the underworld, the story of Inanna, and various other mythological legends. The ancient Mayans had observatories that where they really focused on the cycles of Venus and her retrograde periods of dark. And if I remember right, that was when they would go to war if they wanted to or needed to. And then she'd come out and
Jim,
yeah.
I might add that that conjunction, I think Mars is going to be there later, sets off the only opposition in the US chart. Pluto opposite Mercury.
Okay, yeah, we'll be looking at and kind of get a look at some of that when we get to the Pluto returns too. So there's that.
I would
coming
like
up.
to make a comment.
Yeah.
Because it's been occurring to me recently. You know, we talk about with a lot of the transits and like doing solar arcs and such, that you really only concentrate on singling out the difficult aspects and not the easy aspects with that. And the eclipses of late, these retrogrades, the stations, they have all been trining or sextiling my planets as opposed to making difficult aspects. Nothing outstanding is there for me. And not that I'm complaining, because everything's been really good, but I've come to realize that there is there's validity to ignoring the easy aspects because you don't notice them. When they don't make any big impact, although everything's so good, you don't pay attention to it. So just wanted to throw that in.
Oh, thank you. Yes. Yeah, it is interesting how we tend to overlook the easy ones. It's the hard aspects, as we call them, are the ones where, we learn our lessons. We have to do the work and we'll learn our lessons. And the easy ones come and go a little bit easier. Though the easy ones aren't always, sometimes you have to be careful with easy aspects because they're offering opportunities that can be overlooked or missed because it may seem easy or too good to be true or something of that nature. So you have to be careful with even the easy aspect. But it also will depend on what happens within your chart, because maybe that easy transiting aspect actually fills in the missing point on a grand trine or a kite or some other particular formation that may be significant. So yeah, if you're going to follow your transits, you need to watch them all. Now, unless otherwise noted, the charts are all for Los Angeles time. I think the only ones that aren't are the ingress charts and the Pluto return chart. So here's the Capricorn ingress chart set for Washington, D.C. This is what typically most mundane astrologers look at. Mundane astrology is the practice of the astrology of countries, of states, cities, of geopolitical entities rather than individuals. And they typically look at the Capricorn ingress as setting the stage for the coming year. And so when they do that, they'll set the chart for the nation's capital. And so here we see Sun at 0 Capricorn. It's just before 11 a.m. Washington, D.C. time. We got Pisces rising. We got Saturn and Jupiter in the 12th house. Moon's in Cancer. And typically, in a scenario like this, the moon represents the people. So you always want to look to see what the moon is doing. Here it's opposing Venus and Pluto. And notice this is right after the Venus has stationed retrograde. So Venus hasn't really moved much at all. Because when a planet is stationing, that's, in my humble opinion, when it is strongest, because it's the energy needed to change direction. If you think about like a locomotive or a large ship, if it's trying to change direction from, or anything for that matter, if you're going along driving in a car and you need to stop and back up, you got to first fly the brake, and that takes effort, and then you got to pick up speed as you go the other direction. So it requires more energy to change direction than it does to keep moving in a forward motion or whatever motion direction you're going. So I think that's when they're strongest. And when planets are retrograde, it's also when they're closest to the Earth. So that also is when we may tend to feel that energy more strong. And they tend to move slower when they're retrograde. All little nidbits here and there. Uranus in the 7th house, Mars conjunct the South Node. Some of the other things I don't have personally have a good feeling about 22 for America. It's not like everything is going to suddenly turn up rosy and bright and happy again. All of the ongoing problems are not going to go away. What did I do? That was the Venus retrograde. Here's the Capricorn ingress. There we go. Watch my, so they changed. Okay, so and here you see the moon is trining the South Node and trining Neptune, and with the exception of the moon, all the planets are contained within the nodes. So the moon is moving into kind of like what I would call the handle position on a bucket or basket in terms of a chart pattern. Okay, here we go. Saturn Uranus square. This is their third square of the 3. So this is the final square that they'll be making in this cycle. So this is at 11 Taurus to 11 Aquarius. And we have a very tight, one of the closest aspects we have is moon opposite Jupiter. We have a nice T-square, or rather, well, we have a T-square and a cardinal square, a mutable grand cross. Well, it's not really, it's actually a mixed grand cross with the nodes in mutable signs. However, if you're using mean nodes, they may be in the transitioned, and so it's, you got a potential grand cross coming at any rate with the nodes. Saturn and Uranus are an odd mix. We think of Uranus as the teenager, wild child, wild card of the zodiac. We think of Saturn as being somewhat dodgy and disciplinarian, rule followers, stick with, color in the lines. Don't do a Salvador Dali or Andy Warhol or a modern Cubist type painting. We want you to do something more realistic. Saturn wants us to be real. Uranus seems to want us to express ourselves in our own uniqueness. Thing to keep in mind is that Uranus is Saturn's father. So, it's one of those things where, unlike the more common scenario, perhaps, where you have a strict father and then the son that goes somewhat wild and crazy, here it's the wild and crazy father with the more strict son. Now, I always make it a point to distinguish which square I'm looking at, because there are two. There's the first quarter square and the third quarter square. And if you think about the cycles of the moon, going from a new moon to full moon back to new moon, as the moon grows larger, that's the waxing phase. So you go from conjunction to opposition, that is the waxing phase as the moon grows larger, and that's a time for expansion, for pushing forward, for tending, making things grow, for the early phase of developing things, because the seed planting happens at the conjunction. And then when you go from the full moon back to the new moon, that half of the phase is the waning phase as the moon gets smaller. And this is when things start to contract, you start to consolidate, you start to prepare for the next cycle. So the cycle starts over with each conjunction. You can apply that same principle to the planets. In order to do it effectively, you have to know which planet is faster. In this case, Saturn is the faster of the two planets. And basically, if you know the sequence of the planets in terms of going out from the sun, the closer planet is always going to be the faster planet. I mean, Saturn takes 29 years to go around the sun, Uranus takes 84. So, all right. So Saturn being the faster planet, it's in the waning phase of the Saturn-Uranus cycle. And so it's consolidating, contracting, getting ready for the next new cycle, which won't start for a few years, because it's going to take a while for Saturn to kick. But that's what this energy is about. Now, in order to work it, you then have to go back to when the Saturn-Uranus conjunction was. And right offhand, I'm trying to remember when that was. But that would have been probably, let's see, it's going to be probably, I don't know, folks. I'm going to have to go look it up. So, but it's a long cycle. It's a cycle of probably 40 years or more. And as such, 40 to 45 years. So you need to think back to those of us who are old enough. Think back to when was the conjunction, what was happening at the conjunction, what was going on in your life at that time, where did it occur in your chart, and then follow it through to see where it's at now, because this is talking about a very long-term cycle. And so Uranus is about our originality and our uniqueness, accepting those, becoming that. Saturn at the same time also says, you need to follow the rules, you need to do the work if you want the reward. So Saturn isn't saying don't be your unique individual self. Saturn is saying if you want to do that, you need to do that, but you need to stay within the norms of society. You need to follow the rule rather than go willy-nilly and try to get there and take short. And doesn't like skip steps and shortcuts.
Jim,
Yes.
I think you might look at this also, what's been happening in the stock market.
Yeah.
Because the Saturn Uranus is going back and forth. So you have it going up a lot and then going down a lot and then going back up again, and you never know what you're going to get. And this falls in the 5th, 8th house. So it has to do with investing in money too.
Yes. 5th is the house of creativity. The 8th is a house of others' money. It's the house of things created by partnerships in the 7th house. So yeah. And that square energy, the energy, it's considered, it's called a hard aspect, but it means you got to do the work. to reap the rewards. And so, yeah, you need to pay attention to what's going on. And that's one of the things that financial astrologers do look at cycle and the connections between Saturn and Uranus.
I'm sorry, Jim.
Yeah.
May I say that the conjunction was 1988
Oh,
February
thank you.
at 29 Sag.
Uh-huh. Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
88. Okay. Yeah, that was the end of 88 that I moved to LA. Yeah. Nope. Yeah, that's right. Okay. Okay, any other, Tasha, you got questions or anything you want to say about the quarter, this last square?
Yeah, that was all very, very interesting for me, and because it's in might plays out between the sixth house, serving, working, and supporting others in their projects, and my Uranus wants to do his own thing again.
Yeah.
And in 88, I had my own business. So this all makes very much sense. I still don't know, but it kind of cautions me when you say it's in the waning phase.
Yeah. It's one way I look now. Jane Rudyard calls this square, the third quarter or waning square, the crisis of consciousness. It's about becoming aware of where you are in life and where you want to go and what serves you. It's kind of like a house cleaning. If you've got stuff laying around that you have things that you've been doing or things that you have that are no longer working or of service to you that you don't need, it's a time to kind of pare down and get rid of those things, make room for the new stuff. I mean, it's like you've got a finite bookshelf. You can only put so many books on the shelf. And when that shelf is full, you need to then decide on which ones to get rid of in order to make room for the new ones. It's that kind of thing. Your house will only hold so much stuff, and then you become a hoarder. So you have to get rid of some things in order to make room for the new things or other things that you might want or that might be coming to you.
Mm-hmm. Yes. Thank you.
Uh-huh. Okay, so next up, it's January 1st to midnight. It's the ball is dropping, and the ball would have dropped a long time ago, but 3 hours earlier. But it's Happy New Year in LA time. And you'll notice now all of the planets are contained within nodes. I was going to look it up and I forgot to. It's a Kalsarpa is the Vedic term for this. You can find various things about it. And it plays out in two different ways because it depends on which node is going to be transiting over the planets first. And keep in mind that the node's natural movement is always retrograde against the natural movement of the planets. And so in this case, if you were to take this chart and just follow the nodes around, you would find that the north node is going to touch each of those planets before the south node touches anybody. Granted, when you have a north node conjunction, you have a south node opposition. But I would say that the conjunction tends to be stronger than the opposition in this scenario. And conjunctions represent a lot of new beginnings. So it would appear that 22 is going to be a year for perhaps a lot of new beginnings, a lot of changes. There's a lot of the north node being the future represents a lot of uncertainty, and that uncertainty can engender a lot of fear in people. not too many people, we look forward to the future with, in fond ways, thinking, oh boy, I could, can't wait till I can retire kind of stuff. But, if you're not prepared for it, it's not a good thing to wish for. You end up wishing your life away if you're not careful, wishing or waiting for that next day. So you have to, but for most people, I think there is a lot of uncertainty as to what the future might bring. There's hope. That was the one thing left in Pandora's box after she opened it. But yeah, there's an uncertainty there, and certainly in America, these have been difficult times. And with the new Omicron variant of the COVID virus, we don't really know where that's going to end up going. We know it's more transmissible. We don't know for sure if it's less lethal or how bad it might be. It doesn't seem to be as bad. But then we also know that, the reality is there will be more variants coming up. So yeah, it all in all, I think it's going to be it could be a scary time. And this midnight chart is basically going to be the same regardless of where you are in the world. The only difference is going to be what houses are involved. And here for America, for LA, the focus is going to be on 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, and 8. So I hope you've all got your crystal balls handy and your what. Okay, so we're now going to take a look at 22. And these are, the eclipse is from 21, 22, and then also looking forward into 23. Nice string, 4 eclipses each year, 2 solar, 2 lunar, which is the normal or minimum. Some years you may have 5 or 6 eclipses. And it all depends on, again, it has to do with how close the new moon and full moon are to the nodes. And typically what may happen is in order to have a 3 eclipse scenario, you may have a new moon that is just close enough to the node to make an eclipse, followed then by a full moon eclipse that is probably right on the nodes, and then followed by another new moon that's still fairly, close enough to the node for another eclipse. They're not common, but they're not all that unusual. It is an interesting scenario here where we have 3 years in a row where there's there's just 4 each year. But with this, you can see where they're going to be falling. This shows you date and time, again, for Los Angeles. Shows you the position. For the lunar eclipse, it's the position of the moon. And for the solar eclipse, it's the position of the new moon. There's 2 Saros designations shown. There's the NASA system, which is one that's used by astrophysicists, which is this numbering system. And then the 5 north, 6 north, 7 north, and south. That's a system that Bernadette Brady used and some others. So it's more of an astrological one than astronomical. But there's some other basic information there about the eclipses, magnitude, duration, and so on. So if you're interested, you can look at them and see where they might be falling, and then you can figure out where they're going to be in your chart, whether or not it's something that may play an important role for, there might be something. And particularly if you deal with clients, or something to keep in mind. All right. So what are some of the major events that we have to look forward to in 22? First note, all the planets, all 8 planets will be retrograde at some time during 22. 22 starts with Venus retrograde and it will end with Mars retrograde. And in between, Mercury does it 3 times and everybody else. January 14th, Mercury stations retrograde at 10 Aquarius. So that's the first Mercury retrograde of 22. And it's more, the 22 retrogrades are going to be more of a, kind of a air earth mix. On January 18th, Uranus station direct. Also then the true nodes move into Scorpio. It shouldn't be Gemini, that should be Scorpio Taurus or Taurus Scorpio. Came on me. January 29th, Venus stations direct, 11 Capricorn. So Venus's retrograde is entirely in Capricorn, going from 11 to 26. So that whole span of degrees involving its cardinal signs and the earth signs is going to be fairly active for the next 3 months. Because you see, Venus doesn't get out of its shadow until March 2nd, I got it somewhere. I don't. February 3rd, Mercury will station direct, 24 Capricorn. February 20th, we have our first USA Pluto return. April 12th, Jupiter conjunct Neptune. This is going to be their only conjunction. That only happens one time. April 29th, Pluto goes retrograde. April 30th, we have our first eclipse, partial solar, series 119 or 6 north at 10 Taurus. And then on May 10th, Mercury stations retrograde again. This time at Fort Gemini. It's going to be it should be the longest in terms of time, but the shortest in terms of distance, which is an interesting thing with Mercury retrograde. The one that is longest in terms of time is generally the one that's shortest in terms of zodiacal distance. But also on the 10th, Jupiter will then enter Aries. But then he will retrograde back into Pisces later in the year. May 16th, we have a total lunar eclipse, 25 Scorpio. June 3rd, Mercury stations direct, 26 Taurus. June 4th, Saturn stations retrograde. And then on the 27th, the Neptune stations retrograde. July 4th, Earth as a aphelion, its farthest point from the sun. Happy birthday, America. July 11th, we have our second Pluto return. And those charts are set for Philadelphia, which was point of founding of our country. July 28th, Jupiter stations retrograde in Aries. August 24th, Uranus will station retrograde at 8 Taurus. September 9th, Mercury goes retrograde again. This time it's in Libra, and it goes back to Virgo, 24 Virgo. Stationing direct on October 2nd. On the 8th, Pluto stations direct. On the 22nd, Saturn will station direct. On October 25th, we have a partial solar eclipse from Series 124 or south to Scorpio. On the 30th, Mars stations retro, 25 Gemini. And that lasts until 23. On November 8th, we have a total lunar eclipse at 16 Taurus. It also happens to be election day in the United States. So that should be an interesting day because there's a variety of things happening that day. November 23rd, Jupiter stations direct at 28 Pisces. December 3rd, Neptune will station direct at 22 Pisces. December 20th, Jupiter returns to Aries. The 21st, we have Capricorn ingress, winter solstice again. On the 28th of December, it's our third and final Pluto return. And then December 29th, Mercury stations retrograde, time at 24 Capricorn. And so we will have Mercury, Mars, and Uranus retrograde as we go into 2023. Mars will station direct on January 12th. That's as far as I took it. So I got some of these charts to look at. Okay, so here's the first Pluto return. The chart itself is set for Washington. You can see Pluto is 27, Capricorn 33. Now there are different charts for the United States. They all use July 4th, but they just have different times of the day. There's Scorpio rising, Virgo rising, Sagittarius rising, Gemini rising, and there seems to be validity in using all of them because of the uncertainty of everything. But the one thing that is certain is that Pluto was at 27:33, maybe 32 minutes or 34 minutes, depending upon which chart you're using. But in any case, the return is going to be on February 20th, sometime during the day. Using this information, with here we see it locked with Venus and Mars in Capricorn, Mercury close by in Aquarius, falling in America's, in this case, the 5th house. Now the houses may shift a little bit depending upon which USA chart you're using for the return. And it may be that the Pluto returns will help us to further clarify which chart may be the most accurate. And as we get into 22, what we'll probably do is we'll spend a little time looking at the different charts based on the different USA birth time charts, see how the Pluto return charts differ, to give us a sense of what to look for. Again, with now here, except for the moon, everybody is still contained within the nodes. And at this time, the good news is that all of the planets are in direct forward motion at this time, which is generally a positive thing. It means it's a time where you can really push forward and get done generally, because you don't have any of that backward energy trying to hold you back or create obstacles. Does anybody have any thoughts, comments on this chart?
Sorry, can you repeat that? Can you?
Yes.
Oh, I was just going to ask if you could repeat that last bit you said about not creating obstacle. What was the energy, the shift where there was no more obstacle or something like that?
Yeah, generally when you have all the planets in direct forward motion, there should be fewer obstacles to you pushing forward, getting things done, basically moving forward. Retrograde planets can cause delays and obstacles.
Okay, got you. Thank you.
Symbolically. Yeah.
I'd like to ask a question about, well, I use the Gemini chart, but in the US chart, Mercury is opposite Pluto. And when this gets taken, when it gets tricked off, it seems to be very important because it's the only opposition and both planets are the only ones that are retrograde.
Yeah.
So it seems like that's a pretty strong opposition. And now here we have, on the chart you showed before, the Mercury conjoining Pluto from an opposition. So what would you say that has anything to do with?
Generally, what we're going to be what we look at here would be, since Mercury is the faster of the planets, Mercury is coming off of not really. Okay. So Mercury has just come out of a retrograde. It's 24, 26 degrees basically behind the sun, from the sun. And that's just about as far as Mercury gets. The little table in the upper left-hand corner of the screen shows the planetary symbols, their zodiacal degree, the speed of travel, and then their declination in degrees, which is above or below the ecliptic. And we can see that Mercury is now moving 1 degree 9 minutes in speed per day. So it's just started, it's moving slightly faster than the sun now. So it's starting to close the gap between it and the sun. Let me check something. So Mercury station direct at 24 cap 20. Okay. That was my question. So we did have a Mercury Pluto conjunction shortly before this. And that symbolizes a new beginning, the beginning of a new cycle, which kind of goes along with what you were saying, Cornelia, about them being in opposition at the time of the founding of America. Now, obviously, Mercury's gone around the chart a lot of time since then. There's been many conjunctions, but it's interesting that when Pluto completes its first cycle, Mercury has just conjuncted Pluto and is now moving forward off the conjunction that's symbolizing some kind of a new beginning. So might want to take a look at when that conjunction happened and the chart for that conjunction and see what house it happened in. As that might give us a little more idea of what it might mean for America. Now, I intentionally did not use a bi-wheel here. I'm just showing the base that moment in time. But it's an interesting point. It's something I guess we'll need to take a look at. We may want to, not sure when we're going to do it, but one of the first months we'll be taking a look at in greater depth at the Pluto returns and the other charts that might play into it. And I think that's one that may well be a factor, is that Mercury-Pluto conjunction. Mercury representing communications, the mind, looking at the moon representing the people. The fact that the moon is, in this case, is outside the nodes, is the one planet that is not within the nodes, puts it in a somewhat unique position. It's in conjunct the north node and semi-sextile the south node, which in ancient terms, trying to remember the term, basically the ancients would consider it that it couldn't be seen by, the moon is not visible to either of the nodes because it's in the house next to the south and is 5 or 6 houses north. And because there is no similarity between the signs that the nodes are in and the sign the moon is in. The nodes are in fixed signs, the moon is in a cardinal sign. The nodes are in earth, water, and the moon is in an air sign. So they have no commonality, making it more difficult for them to see each other.
Well, also you have Saturn approaching the US moon at 18 Aquarius.
Yeah.
That will have an effect, I'm sure.
That should also play into it, yeah. Yeah, there's a whole lot of other things going on that are going to play into things. With the Pluto return, it's kind of like a crapshoot because we've never had, America's never had one. We could go back and perhaps say, okay, well, if Jamestown was founded in 1607, pick the day it was founded, that they arrived, and see what the Pluto return for that was, which would have been 1854, 55-ish. That might give us a clue, but what's, what was going on in the 1850s? Well, there was a lot of the big issue generally at the time was the matter of slavery between the non-slave and the slave states. That ultimately, in part, led to the Civil War.
Well, I
the
think-
abolitionists were becoming much more vocal. There's a lot going on.
Well, isn't that what we're having now?
Yep. Though it's, yeah, the red states and the blue states with the conservatives and the liberals.
Mm.
The
Also,
Republican Democrats.
Also, the US chart has a moon return this year.
I hadn't looked at that yet. Okay. There's a whole lot to look for then in the
Yeah.
what's coming up to the United States this year. So like I said, but I think all of it points to changes, an unsettled time.
That's for sure.
I mean, I have long thought that, yeah, I studied economics in college, degree in economics, and I don't understand what's going on with the stock market. To me, it doesn't make a lot of sense. There seems to be an awful lot of optimism or something on the part of the buyers, blind optimism, perhaps. It just seems to be highly inflated in terms of its actual value.
That's with Jupiter and Neptune coming together. You're going to get that.
Yeah, maybe when that happens, that will the delusion of that, if there is one, or the other, bubble might burst, or it might take off and run again.
Jim, may I?
Yeah,
make a
it'll be
comment?
interesting. That Jupiter Neptune conjunction will be interesting because it's in Pisces, the sign that Jupiter used to rule, and is still considered by some still considered to be the co-ruler of. When you have both rulers in there in the sign conjuncting, that's interesting. A long time since that happened.
Jim, may I make a comment, please?
Oh, please do. Yeah.
Okay, so maybe that's the Bitcoin, the illusionary commodity, maybe.
Could be.
Okay.
Yeah.
And I want to say that in the declination, only Uranus is the positive 14. Everything else, all the other 9 planets are in the negatives. So, okay, and you were talking about the changes and stuff like that. Okay, so I think Uranus stands out like a sore thumb. And I think the moon relates to the south node, or the south node is the stronger one, the majority. So I think, most people during this first Pluto return probably wants to go back to the south node, the 3rd house, the retro or the old ideas, or thinking about the nostalgia. Yeah.
There certainly has been lately a large vocal portion of the Americans that seem to want to go back to the way things were 100 to 150 years ago. And I find it an interesting dichotomy because somewhere in, I guess, the 60s, the big shift started, and that was the Pluto-Uranus conjunction. The shift of the Southern Democrats rolling, the Democratic Party was predominantly ruled by the Southern Democrats. They were very conservative, where the Republican Party was the more progressive of the parties. Granted, neither were, ultra progressive, but they were a bit more they weren't as conservative in most areas. But with the 60s, everything shifted. When Kennedy was elected with Johnson, Johnson helped to, Johnson brought in the civil rights. We had the civil rights movement, and we had the civil rights. And a whole lot of things shifted. And it was in the 50s and 60s that things really started shifting for minorities, and the idea of separate facilities for the blacks in the South started to crumble. Now, granted, there are still some there that the non-blacks that would seem to want it to be that way, separate. The idea of separate but equal, and you can never have, things can never be separate and equal. It balance out. So yeah, there seems to still be a great effort to turn the clock back quite a bit. Texas with their anti-abortion law, other states that have similar laws without the provision for Tom, Dick, and Harry, filing lawsuits against whoever because they claimed that they had an abortion, practiced an abortion, drove somebody to an abortion clinic, or may have thought about it. It's going to be real interesting to see how that tends to play out. And those are some of the things I think that are all coming out with Pluto and Capricorn. And this Pluto return, that's why I think this 22 is going to be a big, interesting year. From an election standpoint, all the House seats are up for grabs, and 34 of the Senate seats will be up for the election. 20 of them are held by Republicans, 14 held by Democrats. So it's going to be interesting, to say the least. Here's the Jupiter-Neptune conjunction set for Los Angeles. Here we see again, the moon is the only one not contained within the nodes, but also forming a nice, let's see, is it 0 Virgo opposing Venus and Mars, creating more of a fan or slingshot kind of chart pattern. Again, interesting because at this point, nobody is retrograde.
I could add a little bit to that concept there of the no retrogrades.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
and that's just that it's since discovery of all planets direct motion as an event in time with a beginning and an end.
Yeah.
This particular APDM, that's what I call it for short, APDM, it starts on February 3rd and it doesn't end until May 10th. That's 96 days of all planets direct motion. It is the longest amount of time that the planets will be in APDM since discovery, my perceptual discovery in 2008, because I watch it every single year.
Mm-hmm.
It's the longest period of time. And well, my first impression of APDM was incredibly idealistic, kind of like Jupiter, Neptune. Insanely idealistic. Oh, it's the best thing that's ever happened. The whole universe has to get together and meditate and, transform all this negativity in the world. And then from watching it over time, I began to see it's really the first 3 days or sometimes the first week, depending on how long is the event, that is the most auspicious. As it starts to get towards the end of the cycle, and you know how we talk about the shadow effect of a planet turning retrograde?
Yeah.
So around that time, and again, it depends on how long is the APDM cycle, but sometime the the energy and the events on the planet, or at least in this country, no, actually around the world, they start to atrophy. So that incredible buoyant enthusiasm of having all the planets go, like all stations direct, let's go, all that enthusiasm and adventure and positivity, it starts to shift mid-cycle depending on when like if it's a slower moving planet that's going to station retrograde, then it will start to atrophy soon after. If it's a fast moving planet, then it doesn't have that much of an effect of the negative. It's like you don't feel it as much.
Okay, that's very interesting. It makes it makes sense to me. So yeah.
But it's still an unknown, 2008 isn't very long. We haven't had a lot of time to study it, as an event in time with the beginning and an end. But the planet that brings it in and the planet that brings it out has an influence on the event itself as well.
Yeah. So in this case, what is it?
Just a couple of thoughts from a UPDM observer.
Yeah, thank you. I'm glad you're here.
It's a pleasure to be here. I'm learning all kinds of new stuff. It's great to have an overview, and it's wonderful. Thank you.
Jim, what do you think the Saturn squaring the nodes means?
I think that probably is just a matter of, it probably has a couple of symbolic ideas that go with one, the attempt to balance past, present, and future. But it may also mean an attempt to try to bring them back into balance. Whereas, because you have the one side trying to take us into the past, create a world that as it was, or as they, it's not even a world as it was. It's kind of like they have this idea, some sense of an ideal time in the past, of how it was. And it never really was that way, but that's how they're visualizing it, as opposed to, the other force that's trying to take us into the future, where things are shifting and there needs to be more equality across, more respect for each person as an individual right. So I'm not, it can go either way. Because it's a T square, I think it can go either way, even with Saturn involved. And particularly since you've got Mars conjunct Saturn, makes it a little more dicey, iffy. And so, and let's see, where's the sun? 30 degrees. Okay. And at this point, we're probably less than 2 weeks from a moon wobble. So another phenomenon. Like I say, it's as the old Chinese proverb, to live in interesting times. We got them, folks.
Hey, Jim, can I make a comment about something?
Sure.
So if we look at the United States of America chart and we see the South Node is in the second house of Aquarius, we the people, and then we're trying to get to the 8th house of transformation and Leo, wouldn't the vernacular be something along the lines of thinking more for ourselves and not necessarily following the group energy, and really having one with, because the 8th house can be very transformative. You know what I'm saying? So we're having that kind of going on too with all these other, with this Pluto return, with all these other aspects. So I'm really looking at that. I'm seeing more people kind of detaching from kind of that group dynamic and looking at things very holistically.
Yeah, I would agree with you. There seems to be, you can kind of generalize people into three categories. You've got the ones that are the extreme conservative, you've got the extreme progressive liberal, and then you've got everybody, the other people in between that are leaning one way or the other, but are also more towards, really the idea being, can't we just get along? I can do my, I'll do my thing and you do your thing and don't tread on me kind of stuff. So yeah, I think America is very much in a transition point now. I don't know if this is our midlife crisis, perhaps, when you think in terms of a national cosmic scale. Not, a lot of countries go through periods like this where there's a lot of strife and turmoil. And when they come out, could be one thing, could be another. So it'd be interesting maybe to go back and look at historically past civilizations and countries and how they've fared during these kind of times. It can be a little tricky trying to find a start date for some, but yeah. But you think about Russia and the Russian Revolution, 1917, 1921, the Bolsheviks / the communists finally, I think pretty well had asserted control. And while it seemed to go on forever, it really only lasted about 70 years before the wall came down. Communism was collapsed and Russia kind of broke up, but not entirely. You have a lot of those other Russians that are now into new countries. But Russia seems to now be trying to reassert itself, not just as a world power, but also trying to regain influence and or control over some of those areas that broke away. And there you're dealing with very ethnic issues. America seems to be more philosophical issues rather than so much more than necessarily ethnic, though you do have the underlying, or there is that dominant issue of race and color and to some extent religion, because you have this extreme right that wants to say that our religion should be the religion of the country, while they're forgetting that America was founded on the principle of freedom of religion. So again, it's not that they want to go back to the way things were. They want to go back, and it's like they want to go back and try to change history. It's very interesting, chaotic, hell no time. Yeah.
But when you say that, is that, so like every 2,500 years, right, we point to a different constellation. Isn't that more the age of Pisces, where it started with Christ consciousness and it ended kind of with religious fanaticism?
Yeah. There's much disagreement about when the age of Aquarius starts, or if it started. I think like most things, when you're dealing with planetary transits, you've got orb of influence. The influence can be felt before the moment of exact conjunction or exact aspect, and continues to be felt for a period of time after the point of exactitude. And so I think it is also the same with the ages, shifting from the Piscean to the Aquarian age. The Piscean age is generally considered to have started somewhere, from a date standpoint, it's around the time of the birth of Christ. And I will say that I was raised Christian. I mean, it was Methodist, which is close. No offense to any other Methodists out there. But I find, I think Gandhi made a statement that I've tend to relate fairly well to, and that is, I made a comment, something to the effect that, I rather like your figure Christ, but I don't know about Christians because they're so un-Christ-like. And if you think about it, there is much to be said for how a lot of people that claim to be Christian don't seem to behave in a very Christ-like manner. You kind of have to wonder about that. But I think that's one of the reasons why we're in such a chaotic time right now. And it's not just the Pluto return that signifies this. It's the shifting of it's our the nodes, the other aspects that are going on, all the other things that seem to be coming together at this time, that are creating this air of confusion, consternation, conflict. And some people thrive on conflict. Others, for the most part, most people don't, because it's so disruptive. So I don't know. It's interesting where we're at. It'll be interesting to see where we go. I do expect America to come out the other end, a better country, but I don't know. There is that chance that we may not come out as a whole country. It
Jim,
remains to be seen.
did you notice that numerology, the universal year is a 6, which is domestic affairs.
Yeah.
But the US chart, I think it's interesting, is an 8-year, which the lesson to be learned is how to distribute the wealth equally. That's one of the lessons we have to learn. So
Yeah.
that makes 23 a 9-year, which is an ending of a cycle, and 24 the beginning of a new cycle.
Yes.
9-year cycle. So
Yes.
that should be a growth one.
Yeah. Stick around for that one. Yeah. It all does play out. The basic numerology can be very strong and highly indicative of what's going on. So that's something that I think as astrologers, one should avail themselves of the opportunities to at least have a basic knowledge of numerology, and I would also say the tarot, because they are all interrelated.
Yeah.
The 5-year, which is what this is, 2 + 0 + 1, is the Hierophant card, which is the accessing gateway to the higher knowledge, or the Pope card in some decks. The 6 is the Lovers. And, in some ways it's about loving not just yourself or those that agree with you, but loving everybody. Love thy neighbor as thyself. which a lot of people seem to have forgotten. That and the golden rule. I remember they used to talk about that a lot when I was in grade school, of course, millennium ago, and away. Do unto others as you would have others do unto you. So
I like it in reverse, like Buddha said. Do not do to other people what you don't want done to yourself.
yeah. Yeah, perhaps that is a better way to look at it.
There's a golden rule in every religion.
Yes. We're moving along here. Okay, so what's up next? April 30th, we have our first eclipse of the year. Partial solar eclipse at 10 Taurus. All the planets are still direct. No, I'm sorry, Pluto's retrograde. So Pluto's our only retrograde at this point. Notice Sun, Moon, Uranus are all there very close together. Certainly and lends a Uranian Venusian flavor to the eclipse, since Taurus is ruled by Venus. Venus is conjunct Saturn, or I'm sorry, conjunct Jupiter and Neptune. Zoom. Yes, so, nope. Okay. Mercury at 0 Gemini breaks up the Neptune as final dispositor. So, but everybody else points to Neptune. So yeah, so now we're dealing with 10 degrees of the fixed signs and the Earth sign. So that's, what you want to look. Those are the key sensitive points. What happens is that eclipses fall at a given degree and a given house and sign in your chart, but they also create a sensitive point at that degree that can remain active for quite some time. So other transits to that may activate it. So even though maybe it activates your chart, it doesn't go away when they move out of orb or standard orb. That point is still sensitive. The effect of that eclipse can still linger for some time. How long is subject to astrological, but yeah. Then we have a lunar eclipse on May 15th. This one, 25 Scorpio for the moon, 25 Taurus for the sun. So we see the sun is basically on the fixed star Beta Perseus, also known as Algol, generally considered to be the most malefic star in the heavens. Mercury has gone retrograde. Uranus is kind of out of the mix, but Saturn is definitely in play as it's making a T-square to eclipse. There's a Chiron Venus conjunction in Aries, perhaps in the 4th house, perhaps symbolizing some healing energies within home environment, in our place of being, our grounding.
Jim, what would you say about Algol? It's not mentioned that much.
Well, Algol, the ancient Hebrews referred to her as the Lilith star. The Arabs called it Ras al Ghul, from whence comes our English word of ghoul or ghoulish. She basically, Algol is or Beta Perseus, second brightest star in the constellation of Perseus. It is it was originally thought to be just a binary star system, but I think it's actually a trinary, meaning you have the main star, which is Beta Perseus or Algol, with two smaller stars that seem to orbit it. And it's one of the few binary stars that you can see with the unaided eye, and you can actually watch how it changes, because it's almost like she's blinking at you or winking at us as one of her companion stars orbits in front of her, diminishing the light from main star.
Wasn't she that involved in one of the past eclipses? Can't remember.
Sure any eclipse at 24, 25 Taurus.
Oh, right. Okay, sure.
Depending upon
Okay.
How far back you go, but yes.
Okay.
Working with the fixed stars is kind of different. You can't just look at them based on their zodiacal degree, because some of them are so far off the ecliptic. You really should look at them the way the ancients did, which is in a different manner. They called it parens, which had to do with when the star would rise, culminate, set, or set, and what planet, what other planets were maybe rising or culminating at the same time.
Sure, okay.
So you're basically kind of like dealing with oppositions and squares. So, like if Algol was on the midheaven and the sun was rising at the same time, they would be considered to be in parens, making it significant.
Okay. Thank you.
There's only one program that I know of that deals with that adequately, and that's the Starlight Program, that Brady helped.
Okay. It's just described as very intense somehow, but
Yes, it's intense. It's like I say, it's considered to be probably the most malefic star in the heavens.
okay.
The Chinese have a different name for it, but basically it means something to the effect of a pile of corpses,
Oh, goodness.
corpses or something of that nature.
Okay, well,
So everybody kind of thinks it's very malefic.
okay. Thank you.
But it's one of 4 variations of Lilith in the astrologically.
Thank you.
So here's our second Pluto return, July 11th, the week after our birthday. Pluto's now retrograde. Wide opposition to the sun, but sun's applying to the exact. Sextiling Neptune. It's a wide square to Mars. You can see some of the planets have now moved outside of the nodes. So we have Sun, Mercury, and Venus that have moved beyond the nodes. But there's a whole lot of activity going. Squares, right? We have using the south node, you have a water grand trine with Neptune's sun in the south node. The yod to the moon from Uranus and the sun. Lots of squares. So yeah, it's Moon Venus opposition.
Yeah.
We're jumping ahead to October 25th, which is our second lunar eclipse, another partial. This is at 2 Scorpio. We have a T-square opposition there. 72. That doesn't make sense. Oh.
Jim, about all of these eclipses we have in Taurus and Scorpio, and we have Uranus involved in a lot of them. How are they affecting President Biden's chart? Because he's all Scorpio.
Yeah, he's a Scorpio. He's a late Scorpio, though. So the nodes are going to be transiting over his sun. I remember correctly, he's a late Scorpio. So the nodes will transit his sun. Uranus will approach his sun. I'm not sure what else he's got in Taurus, but yeah, they're going to transit over his sun. The node transit. Uranus doesn't get to it though. Not yet. Maybe, I think it's probably going to be another year or two before Uranus gets. Probably. But it'll be interesting to see. Yeah, it's because there's a whole lot of questions coming up. I think the 22 election will give us a clearer picture of who has the who might be in the driver's seat for the 24 presidential election. You know, Trump is still out there thinking about how the election was stolen from him and how his people would be very unhappy if he didn't run again. He talks about his people, not the people. There's concern about Biden, who will be, he's going to be 80 in 2022, so he'll be presidential election in 24 will be right before his 82nd birthday. Trump would be 78. Things don't look that good for Kamala Harris as far as her running, unless she does a major PR turnaround. Personally, as an old white guy, I am sick and tired of old white men running this country. They have got it so, I mean, they just, you know, I'm sorry, but we're screwing it up. You know, we're making it more about ourselves than other people. You know, I like some of what Bernie Sanders has to say, but Bernie's going to be what, 80 something or other, 105 or election. And Bernie's just a little too extreme. That's, you know, the unfortunate thing is that Bernie, the smart move, I think, for Bernie would be to maintain his position in Congress and work towards establishing a party control of Congress so that he could then push some of his agenda. As president, he wouldn't be able to, you know, he couldn't accomplish diddly squat because, you know, the Congress is always going to be too well balanced to go for things that extreme. I mean, that's just the hard facts of life of politics. And, you know, I worked for the federal government for 42 years between military and career government service.
Wow.
And, you know, and I was well familiar with the effect of politics on getting things done. The politicians pass laws so they can get reelected. Then they expect, you know, the federal bureaucracy to try to deal with those laws. And when the bureaucracy then interprets the law in the way that it's actually written, which may not have been what the Congress wanted, they get upset. The thing we have to keep in mind is the life of a bill going through Congress. Something is proposed, and then it gets modified, goes through the committee, modified, comes out of the committee and goes to House or the Senate for consideration and gets modified, and then it goes over to the other House or Senate for review and gets modified some more. And at some point, you know, it actually ends up becoming a law and gets signed by the president. Excuse me, I'm going to sneeze. Excuse me. Okay.
Bless you.
Thank you. I'm doing well. So, okay. So, yeah. Ultimately, yeah, the best intentions of Congress often get watered down by the time they become law. And ultimately, you know, what the congressmen want, senators want is be able to say that, you know, this bill brought this much money and jobs into my state. Now, the fact that they may not have supported it when it was going through the process has nothing to do with the fact that they will take credit for it in election. That I find quite interesting because it would seem most voters really don't know what their Congress people are doing, how much time they actually spend there. I mean, some of them, it's like, you know, it's like they're getting paid full-time pay for a half-time job. But that's my bully pulpit for politics. I find it fascinating because of the. Where are we? Okay, we got through the solar eclipse of the 25th, and that's right around Kamala Harris's birthday, I think.
Oh,
In early Scorpio. I know Hillary.
She's a Libra sun.
Oh, she's got a Libra sun. Okay, she's a late Libra, right?
Aries moon or something.
Yeah, okay.
10/20.
Man, this is closer to Hillary's. She was what, the
I think
28th
she's
of
a
October?
27 Libra something. She is late Libra and she does have a sun moon opposition.
Let's see.
Does
I got-
does anyone know when Uranus goes into Gemini?
Um,
Uh,
no, but I could probably I can check it out when we get through the slides, and then we can I'll take a look at it. I've got a program that tell me all those kinds of
Good.
wonderful things. Next up comes in November 8th. It's election day. I always start with the Dixville Notch, Hampshire chart, because that's where the first poll opens for voting. All 27 of them, or however many people live in there at the time, vote. It's always fun. Not necessarily telling, but fun. But more importantly is shortly after that, we have our lunar eclipse. So election day brings us a lunar eclipse at 16 Taurus Scorpio. And shoot howdy, look, folks, there's Uranus retrograde at 16 Taurus. I'll look at the other side here. We have Sun at 16 Scorpio. We have Mercury at 15, Venus at 20. Saturn's at 18 Aquarius, still making that T-square. So yeah, it's a whole lot of oppositions and squares going on here, and it's going to be a very interesting day. Jupiter's getting ready to enter Aries, but not quite there. Mars is retrograde in Gemini. Quincunx Pluto. Mars squaring Jupiter and Neptune. If you'll notice, we have Mercury at 1552 of Scorpio and the Sun at 1601 of Scorpio. So what that means is that Mercury is Cazimi. It's within 17 minutes of arc of the Sun. So it's basically crossing, in this case, because it's direct, it's passing behind the Sun on the far side of the Sun from the Earth. And in fact, later on the 8th, we have the actual superior conjunction of Mercury and Sun, which is when, as I say, when Mercury, the superior conjunction occurs when either Mercury or Venus is direct and is conjunct the Sun, because then they're on the far side of the Sun from the Earth. The inferior conjunction is when they are conjunct but retrograde, and that's when they're between the Earth and the Sun. So you can think of the inferior conjunction as being like a new moon, new beginning, and the superior conjunction as being more like a full moon opposition, midpoint. What do we have? We have Mars, Jupiter, Uranus, Neptune for the 8 planets. Half the planets are retrograde on election day. It's going to be one of those days where, the outcome won't be known for a while after the fact. But we're used to that now. Even with early calls and all that other stuff, there will be some close contest. No doubt there will be allegations of fraud. Somebody stole the election. I think one of the questions that comes up, the unknowns, is, if Trump keeps pushing his agenda that the election was stolen, that you can't trust the election because of fraud, that the Democrats will do whatever they need to steal the election, he may end up discouraging Republicans and some of his own followers and Republicans from voting, which could ultimately become the self-fulfilling prophecy of the Democrats winning and taking a stronger control over things, not because they were a better choice, but simply because the other side bother to vote because they were afraid to Trump. And of course, they will claim Trump afterwards.
Hmm.
But it's a crapshoot. Uranus and Saturn involved. Yeah, it's a total crapshoot. So dust off your crystal ball and shuffle up your tarot cards and your oracle decks or whatever you use. See what happens. Then let's see. Here's the December 21st, 2022 Capricorn ingress for Washington, D.C. Got a Mars Moon opposition. Mars is retrograde. The south node is the finger of a yod from a Mars Chiron yod. Probably not the strongest of yods because it involves nodes in Chiron. I generally don't consider. I consider the aspect strongest when they involve the 2 of the 10 planets, 2 or more of the 10 planets. But I don't discount the effect of Chiron or the nodes or even the ascendant in heaven. As you can see, let's see, Saturn's out to 21 Aquarius, so it's pretty much getting it. And depending upon your orb stretcher, it may still be within orb Uranus. They're doing a double separation, so I wouldn't consider it myself. I think it's pretty much past. But what it amounts to is the effect is lingering and starting to diminish as Saturn approaches the next major aspect, which is their but I think interesting too is that the Moon, Mercury, Venus, and Mars are all out of bounds. Mars is north and everybody else is out of bounds south. That's a lot of extreme unknown energy.
Mhm.
Beyond the boundaries of the sun, it's like the dog at the park off its leash. And pretty much, it has a choice. It can stay close. If it's well trained, it'll stay close and behave. If not, it may run, it just may take off. And who knows where it'll go and what it might do. They can go either way. Generally, I think if it's a minus declination, which means it's in southern declination, which from our perspective puts them lower to the southern horizon, tends to, you kind of equate that with south nodal things or the past. Positive is more northern or higher in the sky, and you can equate things from a north node perspective in terms of future, the unknown, fear factor. And Mars is really contradictory at this point because it's also retrograde. So it's like, well, let's see, out of bounds north, which should be so it may want to take us into the future, but because he's retrograde, maybe he doesn't really want to go there. He's trying to pull us back from this, the idealism of what the future can bring. And with all those southern, out of the 3 Moon, Venus, the Moon, the Venus, and Mercury all out of bounds south, and the Moon representing the people, maybe there is a more of a movement towards going back to the old ways of things, trying to find that past when things seem so much nicer. We can idealize the 50s, father knows best and all that good stuff, which didn't really exist for most people. There's a success of TV shows, I think, is based on the fact that they fictionalize something that people want or desire, and the more they represent what people desire but don't have, the better the show will do. In
Jim,
some
what do
cases, I'm sorry.
I'm just noticing Saturn has been going over the US moon this year also.
Yep.
But the interesting thing is that it's in Aquarius. So even though Saturn is that Aquarius moon is being ticked off by Saturn, I don't know if that makes us more conservative or less.
Um, it can tend to make us more idealistic. I think because, you know, Aquarius is the sign of the dreamer, the one who loves humanity but hates people. Or let's say they love humanity, they just don't necessarily like people. They have a lot of people they don't like, but they love,
Mhm.
you know, humanity or some aspect of humanity or some cause. It's the love of a cause, or belief in a cause. And anybody that doesn't believe in that same cause is kind of then like on the other side, like don't like you.
And
So, yeah,
Saturn, oh, Saturn's
Go ahead.
one of the original rulers of Aquarius too,
Yeah.
right? Is that
yes.
Right.
that?
So that
Oh,
so Saturn's happy there.
yeah,
Moon not so much.
right.
No, it seems to me that Saturn indicates the way the American people have been feeling or will be feeling the depression,
Mm,
Yeah.
the anxiety at being restricted
mm.
and all that kind of stuff that we've been suffering through.
Yeah, it's
Maybe once Saturn moves away, maybe that'll lighten up.
yeah.
Hmm.
In some ways, it just came to me like with the US has an Aquarian moon. And in some ways, Aquarius is kind of like, do as I say, not as I do. A sign.
Interesting.
They may make a good point of supporting something, but in their talk, but their daily actions may not actually exemplify that. Where we at? The return, and then here we have our New Year's chart for 2023.
My goodness.
We see Mercury, Uranus, and Mars all retrograde. So we go into the year with 3 planets retrograde. 22 starts with Uranus and Venus retrograde, and ends with Uranus and Mars and Mercury retrograde. Saturn sitting at 22 Aquarius. We have this is just after the third and final Pluto Venus conjunction. Mercury is also doing a triple conjunction with Pluto at this time because of its direct and retrograde mode. Did it? No. I don't think it did.
So I know it depends on where it is, but if you have a Pluto, oh no, I have a Pluto Venus conjunction in my chart. So that this is Pluto Sun. Okay.
No, you have a Pluto Venus conjunction here, yeah. Actually, yeah, stellium with Mercury, Pluto, and Venus. Because the excuse me, the late degrees of the cardinal signs are going to be very active this coming year because you got Pluto there. And so yeah, every time any of the planets, and it's basically going to be, you know, Moon, the Sun, Mercury, Venus, Mars pass through those. That cardinal cluster is going to be activated when Mars goes through Aries. Obviously, it's going to be activated every, you know, whenever the Sun or Mercury and Venus go through, you know, Aries, Cancer, Libra, and back to Capricorn again. So there's going to be a lot of activity in that area. Plus the other 2 Earth signs, Taurus, oh, there's Uranus, and Virgo. So yeah, that seems to be the primary focus of energy. And the earth signs are basically the reality, the grounded signs. Taurus being the most grounded, fixed earth. Capricorn being a little bit less grounded, but still wanting to keep its feet on the ground as it pushes us forward in its aggressive cardinal nature. Virgo, the least grounded of the three earth signs, but the most critical, self-critical and self-analytical. So I think that was the last chart. Yep, there we go. Thank you. Our future meetings, we have, let's see, January 9th and then February 13th and March 13th. Again, the PDF of the entire slideshow with all the charts I will have available in a couple of days. It'll be downloaded, or it'll be uploaded to our Facebook page, and it'll be available for anybody that would like a copy of it. The link for this video will also be sent out to everybody that's in the Meetup group who's signed up for messages from the organizers, is most people. But it'll also be posted to our Facebook page. And if you don't want to access it either way, you can email me and I will send the link and the PDF to you when they're available. That's Jimmy_Eddie@hotmail.com. So, all right, I'm gonna pop out of this. Let's see here. I'm gonna jump over to something. Matrix.
Thanks for this, Jim. This was
Yes,
Yeah,
thank
you're
you
very
very
welcome.
much.
Oh, we're down to 12. Okay, I haven't been really paying attention. I got a little program called, where did you go? Let's see, did you come up? There it is. Okay. Let me come back here. Back here, I'm going to do another share screen. Here we go. And share this. This is a handy little matrix program that I picked up a few years ago, which allows me to go in and identify when planets station direction, when they change signs, when any given aspect will occur between planets, and so on. And let's see, there we go. That should do the trick. And in this case, what we want to know is sign ingress for Uranus. So we're going to click off everybody else. And get rid of all these guys. And let's see, let's do stations. Boom. Okie dokie. This should give us what I'm looking for. Oh, there we go. All right. So we see it's starting in 21, 23. Let's see. July 6th of 25 is when. No, hang on. Yeah, there it is. When Uranus will first set foot into Gemini. Goes to 128 of Gemini and then stations retrograde, leaving Gemini on November 7th.
So
back into Taurus.
don't we have a Uranus return in the US chart?
Let's see. Let's see. Coming up, yeah, 250. 3 times 84 is 252. There should be a Uranus return for the United States coming. Where is Uranus in the US chart? Do you remember?
Oh,
Well, in the Gemini chart, it's in the first house.
Well, what degree though?
I can't remember the degree because I don't have this chart in front of me.
Okay, let me pull up it. Let me find it. Let me.
But
find
that
it.
would be interesting to see. That would tell us a lot if the Gemini rising chart is true or not.
Yeah, I think the Pluto return and the Uranus return will give us a lot of information. Let's
Yeah.
the Gemini rising. Here we go. We'll use that one. Uranus is 8 Gemini 53, and it's going to be basically the same within a couple of minutes, one way or the other, depending, regardless of which chart you use, because it never moves that fast.
Right.
853. So let's see. It comes back into you Gemini on November 7th of 20. So it leaves on the 27th. Returns on April 25th of 2026. Stations retrograde then at 5 Gemini 42. So we won't have a Uranus return until 2027.
Well, I think that's when we start the Aquarian age, probably.
And we're certainly getting closer to, yeah.
Yep.
And if you use
Yeah.
the Gemini chart, then you can see that we're coming back to being born in a revolution again.
Yeah, so there's another way to do this using solar here. We can do a return chart. And what we want is the Uranus return to the natal position that's coming up. So let's see what it tells us. July 26th of 2027, then November 6th, and then May 11th of 28. It looks like we have 3 coming up. 28 will be interesting because that'll be the third Uranus return. It'll be our third Uranus return. And it's also then, of course, another presidential election year.
Well, I think I'm going to watch this closely because I think we can really see if the Gemini chart is correct.
Yeah, I think I agree that the Pluto return and the Uranus return should help clarify which of the various charts is accurate,
Right.
if any of them. Yeah. And let's see, there's also then the, let's see, when's our, please move this window away from the shared application. Oh, what? Okay. Solar return. Net. Yeah, okay, so our solar okay, wrong year. Yeah, it will be interesting to see how things go. Let me do this. Goes to time, goes back, goes. Yeah, moves on beyond that. Stop that. What I want to do now is do one second. Oh, that's it. We'll look at. Here we go. Okay. Using Gemini rising, and let's. There's our first. All right, so here's the Gemini rising chart on the inside and the Pluto return on the outside. Notice, yeah, the difference being that Gemini rising, which is very early on July 4th of 1776.
I'm not seeing the charts.
Oh, sorry, I forgot to do the screen share. Excuse me. Pardon me. Silly me, silly me. Here we go. Share and share along. I'm going to share. I should. Do you see it now?
Yes.
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 Oh, whoops, wrong chart. No, you're just seeing the
Wrong
single chart.
chart.
Yeah. All right. Let's try again. Try. We'll get it right. Well, it's supposed to be this one. I'll show you that one. There we go. There's the duo. Okay. You see the Gemini rising chart on the inside as Uranus at 8, Gemini 53, Pluto's at house at 2734, Moon's at 18, Aquarius 12. And the Pluto return chart has, there's Pluto. Uranus is at 11, Taurus. Let's see, we have Saturn's at 1752 of Aquarius, so it's basically transiting over the moon.
When you get
Mercury
those
at-
two, remember what I said, that those two together are very important.
Yeah, and then you got, here we have, you see here from the inside chart, inside wheel, Pluto's at 27, Capricorn, and Mercury at 24, Cancer. And now we have Mercury at 6, Aquarius, wide conjunction, Pluto at 27, Capricorn, but they were just conjunct. And then sitting basically on the US South Node at 7, Aquarius. Yeah. Very interesting. Other thing we can do.
Well, it just seems interesting to me that you've got Uranus right on the ascendant at the same time you got the Pluto return.
Yeah, and which is where Uranus was. Then let's hang on. Get rid of some of this cluster here. We're gonna go, there we go. Here we go. What we're gonna do is a tri-wheel. Wow, I'm crazy here. Zoom in. Here we go. Okay, so we're going to share. And oops, there we go. I'll share that one. Okay, go away. Okay, let's try again. Screen share. There we go. Now do you see the tri-wheel?
Yes.
Okay, so again, the inside is the Gemini rising chart. The middle wheel is the secondary progress chart for the United States.
Oh.
And you can see that in all this time, Pluto really hasn't done much.
Wow.
No, oops, wrong. Sorry, I got the wrong charts here.
Oops.
Hang on. Let me go back and fix this. Too many charts. Okay, there we go. I want that. There's the one we want. Okay, now let's do the tri-wheel and share this with the rest of you. Okay. Come on. Okay, screen share. There we go. Share and show. Okay, now we got the right charts. Okay, yes, you see that this is for actually right now. So let me move this down and let me change this date to the date of the Pluto return. Give us a little better idea. There we go. So, okay, so now we're see there. All right, so what we have is the Gemini rising chart on the inside, the USA progress chart as of February 20th of 22 in the middle, and then the transits as of that date and time. Yeah, and here you can That's, yeah, so we have a progressed lunar return coming up.
Mhm.
It's will be exact shortly before the third and final Pluto return. Progressed moon has gone over the US South Node. Progressed Mercury has gone over over the moon. Progressed Mercury is now direct. Progressed Mars is still retrograde. Progressed Saturn is also retrograde, as is Neptune. So we got, looks like we have Neptune, Mars, and Saturn retrograde. All the other planets are direct. Our progressed Sun is at 16 Pisces. So it was dancing with Neptune over the past couple of years, which might help explain some of the chaos that's going on, the conflict between the two ideals. Yeah, these are definitely interesting times. And they're just going to get, I think they're just going to get more interesting for the next
Ooh, yes.
years. So it's like, stick around, enjoy the ride.
Yeah.
You know, hey, it certainly beats the alternative.
Maybe.
Okay, so it's 2:25, time to wrap this up. Take a,
It's been great. This is most enlightening.
Yeah. Wonderful.
You.
Yeah, thank you.
I did a snapshot of this tri-wheel. It's for the date of the first return, but not. We can, that's right. 28, 22. And here's the snapshot for the last one. I'll do another. I'll capture the. What I'll do is I'll add these two images to the slideshow. So you'll be able
Okay.
to look at these tri-wheels for the first and last of the Pluto returns to the United States.
Yeah.
Here you see that the progressed moon is now at 21 Aquarius. So it went over our moon, but it's conjunct progressed Mercury. And it's heading towards our progressed sun, which means we have a progressed new moon coming up. 9 and 17 is 26. So it'll be in 24, late 24, possibly early 25. We will have a progressed new moon.
In the 10th house.
Yeah, in our 10th house based on our natal.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah. In fact, hang on, let me do this. We can put it there. 1, 2. Whoops. Okay. So, and then we back off a couple of months. Yeah. So it's going to be October of 24, right before the election.
Right.
Damn.
Well,
I'll throw that one in there too, with a little explanation with it. So,
thank you.
yeah. Okay, folks.
Great.
We're going to stop the screen share. I want to thank all of you who have stuck with this. Thank you for your contributions, your questions, your comments. It's been a good day. Happy holidays. Have a safe and happy new year. And we'll see you in January.
Right.
Yes, thank you.
Stay
so
well.
much.
Thank you so
Peace
much.
out, folks.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye.
Enjoy.
Enjoy.
Hi.
Everybody.